Developing tonight, a new report says the head of Formula One's governing body told officials not to certify the Las Vegas street circuit ahead of last November's race. The BBC report cites a whistleblower who claims the FIA president, Mohammed bin Sulayem, wanted event officials to find a way to declare the track unsafe for driving. The temporary street circuit was not complete in time for the organization's normal inspection window. Instead, it was inspected the morning before the first practice session when a drain cover came loose and damaged 2 cars. The entire course had to be re-inspected, pushing back the start of practice until 2 a.m. As that chain of events was unfolding, the whistleblower claims that their managers, speaking on behalf of the FIA president, asked them to find more flaws with the track that would help the organization cancel the event. The FIA confirmed that a complaint had been filed over the allegations, but would not confirm that it was from their president. They claim that some aspects of the report are inaccurate.